Let's see here. All right, we are live. Let me get all my notes together and I'll wait for a few of you to hop on. Let's see here. Okay. Let me just do a couple housekeeping things. So I know if you guys are commenting, turn that off and let me, okay, here we go. All right, so this summit, I am like still riding a high, guys. It was phenomenal. But I'm really glad that you guys chose the storytelling with Pat Quinn because this is something that I really need and wanted to work on. Let me see here. We got 2 people on. Who is watching? Give me a little wave in the comments. But storytelling is something that, you know, we as entrepreneurs know we have to do because our audience has to be comfortable with us, right? They have to know us, they have to like us, and they have to trust us before they invest in us. So it's definitely something that's super important, but that we a lot of times put on the back burner. Hey, D, what's up? So, oh, D, this will be great for you in your new endeavor. Yes, so let me start here. Sorry, I'm going back and forth between my notes. Yeah, so storytelling, super important, but something we really put on the back burner a lot of the times, right? Like, you know, we don't think that our stories are extraordinary enough, that we're just ordinary. Who's going to want to listen to us? Blah, blah, blah. You know, every single limiting belief that you could ever think. But the great thing about this is ordinary works. Ordinary is awesome because ordinary is relatable. Hold on. Sorry, I gotta change the timer on the iPads for Little Miss. Okay, give me 2 seconds, Nicole. All right, there you go. You're welcome. Yes, so ordinary is awesome. So I don't want you to get too anxious or nervous when it comes to the storytelling piece. You know, like what story are you going to tell? Because we are going to put all of the systems together and I'm going to give you all of my notes so that you can do this seamlessly. And before we get too far in, I put all of my notes in a Google Doc so that you guys can go and download it and either follow along now or afterwards or just to have to keep. So that's over in the unit section, I believe under unit 4. So let's dive into it. Okay, so there are 3 pieces to storytelling, and it'll be in that graph in the first part of the Google Doc. But you have the ordinary circle, right? So it's the I've walked in your shoes piece, the I know how you feel piece. And then you have the extraordinary piece, which is I've solved that problem that you have. And the third piece is your why. So you telling your story is bigger than yourself. It's very purposeful. And the intersection between those 3, that is where your perfect storytelling is going to come into play. So let me just pull this up right quick. I think it's down here. Yeah. So if you see in the Google Notes, the Google Doc there are the three pieces to the story that we just talked about. And remember, that intersection is your sweet spot. So now we're going into, he called it episodic storytelling. So this is choosing a single moment. It's not telling the whole story. So he used a graph here. So, all right. So things were bad, and then they got good. Can you see that? So this is the part right here. That is the moment that your story is going to be told. The moment, the room, the situation, the circumstance that you are going to bring your audience into this journey, right? So again, it's not telling the whole story, and it's not giving your deepest, darkest secrets, right? That's not what we want to do here. And a lot of times that's what people struggle with. You know, they don't want to get vulnerable. They don't want to tell the deep, dark secret because they're embarrassed or shameful or whatever the case may be. And they think that people tell them to tell those deepest, darkest secrets, you know, when they're talking about, oh, sharing your story, giving your why, your purpose, and all this stuff. So no, it is not that. Where to go down here? Yes, so choose that moment and take your audience into it. The other piece is to make them emotionally attached to you. The quickest, the fastest, oh my goodness, I can't with her. She just went to the bathroom and came back and she didn't have pants on. But the quicker you can do this, attach emotion to them, to the story, to get that hook in, the better. Because if they are emotionally attached to you in the story that you are telling, they are not going to look away. Their attention is not going to be going, you know, every which way if they are emotionally attached to what you are telling them. So Pat was telling this story about one of the girls who was a client of his, and she was homeless for a while. Her and her family lost their home when she was younger, and a family said that they could come and stay with them. And when they got there, there wasn't actually a room for them to stay in. They had like a big chicken coop that was built off of the house, and they said, you can stay here if you need somewhere to live. And her story was about walking into that chicken coop, about walking into that room. So the beginning of her story was the emotion. She took the audience into that room with her. The first things she saw, smelt, how she was feeling, how she was processing the information. That was her emotional hook, right? To bring the audience into the story. So one question that you can ask yourself, you know, where is that one moment? You know, what room can you take your audience into that is going to elicit that emotion, that is going to set up the stage for what we'll talk about later in story selling? Okay, so 4 ways you can tell your story. You can describe what you learned from your hobbies or your interests. So you can teach people about fitness or eating Whole30, or, you know, I'm super into all things mindset. So I could teach things on neurolinguistic programming or emotional intelligence, right? Or 2, you can tell what you learned from school or work. So a lot of people who leave corporate world to get into entrepreneurship obviously had 9 to 5s before they broke off on their own, so they can give their clients, their community, their audience information on all of the decade of work that they did in sales and marketing from a previous corporate job, right? And how to apply it to your small business or entrepreneurship. The third piece is I searched for a solution to my problem for forever until I decided to create the solution. I found the solution. Here is what I did. And 4, you can take one system that you know and apply it to something else. So maybe strategies, like for an example for me, strategies that I learned in sales and marketing and corporate insurance. Okay, I can take those same sales and marketing tactics or programs or softwares and I can apply them to my new coaching programs, to my new digital products, whatever that may be. So now we are getting into top tips for story selling. Let me see here. I'm going back and forth through my notes, but top tips. Okay, yes, here we go. You want to keep your story simple. Simple is the name of the game. And this is something that I personally really struggle with, because once I get going, sometimes I just keep going, right? I give all the details, all the information, and even all the details and information on the things that don't matter, that aren't necessary for the story. So keep it simple. A couple easy ways to do this are to not include extra details that separate you from the audience. So what he was saying there was, if you are talking to an audience and you want to talk about your kids, don't say, oh, me and my 2 daughters, because what happens? Everyone in the audience who doesn't have 2 daughters kind of like tunes out, right? Even if it's not totally, they're not invested because they're like, I don't have 2 daughters. But if you were to say, so my 2 kids, okay, well, everyone's like, oh, okay, I have kids. You know, you're not separating any of the connection there. So less detail is best. It opens up the room for more connections with more people. And try telling your story in half as many words. Right? So literally take out 50% of your words, and your story will still work if the emotional line doesn't change as a result, because you want that emotional hook, remember? So if you are hooked, you don't need all of the other details. Okay, next tip. Create a contrast. Some of the best stories have a contrast. So they have a before and they have an after, right? And what happens in the in-between? The in-between is that transformation, or that pivot, or what you did that got you to the after, right? So he also talks about body language when you are telling your story. And one of the things he talks about is using a left or right pivot, or looking left or right, or using your hands or fingers or whatever the case may be to separate points, right? So you see me trying to do before and after and in between, right? So it keeps you following along. It keeps you more engaged. Let's see. And slow down when ish gets important. A lot of times we find ourselves talking quickly to try and get through something, or especially if you are in front of a live audience and you're not pre-recording, you will talk really, really fast because your adrenaline is flowing, right? So when you are trying to make an important point, slow down your talk. Slow down your voice, right? Because it'll suck people in, which is exactly what we want. In contrast to that, using your volume is an excellent way to bring people back in. So if something like big happens, or there's that pivotal point, you can influx your voice. You can make your voice louder. But when you get to that one-liner, right? That one line that brings it all together, you want to slow down. You want to drop the volume of your voice. And he talks about, I think he calls it a Scooby-Doo effect. I don't know why. But you pause and you look left and you look right. And then you kind of like drop down and lean your head in. And you drop that one-liner. Like that, you were created for this. It looks really cool when he was doing it when he was in full pitch mode. But it's an awesome tip, especially in Zoom calls right now, since we are like all virtual and crazy. These are really easy ways to keep people engaged and their attention on you. Next tip is tell your story concisely and with clarity. So, what is the problem that you solved? And who is this story for? Be specific, be super concise and clear in your message. I have a note here that he said some people are afraid to tell their story because they think it's not good enough or extraordinary enough. But they forget that other piece of the pie, of the circle. That ordinary piece can be more impactful than the outcome, than the extraordinary outcome, right? So you have to use them all in tandem together. One of the tips he gave was don't be so ordinary that you miss out on the extraordinary. Oh my gosh, Dee, you're cracking me up. Deanna said your grandma's a professional at the lean in on Zoom. Quick story. Meme, she holds her camera like this in FaceTime, so you literally just like only see her forehead. So Meme stays zoomed in, D. Yeah, I got you on that one. But these three pieces, so the ordinary, the extraordinary, and the why, using all of those in tandem is going to create your signature story. So that story that sells, the story that hooks those, gets those emotional hooks into people so they can't look away, right? Ordinary is powerful when you work in tandem with your why and your outcomes. All right, let's see. What was the next piece? Okay, so we're getting into his second talk here. I know, Megan, you were looking for information on that. Let me find that. I have multiple documents. Okay, day number 2 here. Okay, so there is an exercise if you're having trouble narrowing down your story or you want to narrow down your story. Write down 3 sentences that your ideal client said yesterday to their spouse or their best friend. So, D, I'll throw an example out there for you. Like, I don't like the way that I look in my clothes anymore. Or, I keep getting sick. I know it's because I need to get healthier. Or, I don't have the time or the wherewithal or the headspace to be able to meal plan and prep, right? Oh, hey, beautiful Kelly. So those would be 3 sentences that your ideal client would be saying. right? So think of, what are they struggling with when they're talking to their girlfriends? What are they texting about? What are they calling about? What is their issue that they're dealing with right now? In my stage with my daughter laying on the coffee table with an iPad, watching a muted TV and eating chocolate cereal. I don't have the time. I have trouble prioritizing my time. I have trouble with my time management. Why? Because I always have a kid underfoot, right? So how can I do X, Y, and Z in my business when I'm so busy? These would be conversations that someone who was in like a productivity, specifically a mom productivity niche, would be like eating this up, right? So write down those 3 sentences that your ideal client said yesterday to their spouse or to their best friend. And if you can't think of any sentences that your ideal client would say, I challenge you to have 20 conversations with your ideal clients. Now, these aren't conversations where you're going to be selling or asking anything of them. You're literally having a conversation to see how they are feeling, what they want, what they need, and you're going to use their language, because the more that you can use their language, the more they are going to resonate, the more that you're going to have those emotional hooks that you'll be able to use, right? Another one of his lines that I loved, actually, I think it might have been Pete Vargas's, but he brought it up, and he said, think of yourself as the best kept secret. So by you not telling your story or, that moment, or taking your audience into that room, you're hiding a secret from them. And, Dean and Tony get more into it by talking about you not sharing and you not expressing yourself that way. You're actually doing a disservice to your potential clients, to those people who have the problems that you found the solution for. Hey guys, got a couple more people hopping on. Kelly Dave Care for the win. I wish. Goodness gracious. Okay, so that leads us into what he called his 3-act play. So this is going to be setting up your story in 2.5 minutes from start to ending. So beginning, the pivot, and the now or the after. You are going to be able to get your whole story out in 2.5 minutes. Fabulous, right? So he talks about the before. Here we go. So act 1, the before. It was what your life was like before. So when you didn't like the way that you looked in your clothes, you had terrible time management, whatever the case may be, what did your life look like? And boil it down to 3 characteristics or 3 things that you were really struggling with. And you're going to do this in 60 seconds. So if we're going on like the health pitch again, it would be, I just felt tired all the time. I didn't like myself. I hated the image in the mirror. I hated how my clothes fit. I just hated my body, right? Then you move to act 2. Act 2 is the pivot. So this is when things change, when you found the solution. So talk about what changed for you. So that change, what did it feel like? This is another place where you can get those emotional hooks in. What did that pivot feel like? Once I found going Whole30 or gluten-free or whatever the diet was, once I found that, I felt so much better. It wasn't just that the weight fell off. I became healthier. There was less pressure on my joints. I was able to fit into my clothes. It was blah, 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 blah. Right? So really use that feeling piece and describe the solution that you used. And you're going to do that in 30 seconds. And so for act 3, which is the now, or the after, depending on how long ago it happened. And this is what it's like now after you made the pivot. So turn those 3 characteristics that you did in Act 1, so change them to positive. So you go from I hated my image in the mirror to I love the way I look and feel, right? I hated my clothes. I had to buy a whole new wardrobe because I dropped so much weight, or I finally fit into clothes that I haven't been able to fit into in a decade or since high school. And I hated my body. Now I have the confidence to boldly walk into that conference room, or my body feels so healthy and strong. I now know what it's capable of. So what you really want to do there in 60 seconds is give that feeling, right? And then change those 3 characteristics from the before, which were negative, to a positive. Now, a couple tips for this. There are 2 ways that you can screw up this 3-act storytelling. One is if Act 1 does not look like the person that you are talking to. Okay, so if you are not talking to your ideal client, like say a fitness guru or like a bodybuilding champion was who you were talking to when you were talking about, oh, I had so much weight, I hated my body in the mirror, I hate my clothes, blah, 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 because they can't resonate with that. They are not your ideal client, correct? And number 2, if Act 3 isn't what they want. So if the outcomes that you are describing are not what they would want to buy, then they're going to be turned off by your story, right? They would have sat through it if they were hooked in Act 1. But if what you were selling in the now or the after in that Act 3 is not what they want, they're not going to purchase. So that pivot piece, that Act 2, where you're really honing in on that emotional hook, is what you are selling. So the pivot is what you created, the solution you found, the product you made that is supposed to give them the results of Act 3. Does that make sense? You all with me here? Oh, Courtney hopped on. Hey, Court. D, there you go. All right, let's see here. What's next? Yeah, so your pivot is what you are selling, and make sure you're telling your story intentionally and concisely. And once you find that like perfect marriage of the ordinary, the extraordinary in your why, and you find that point, that super specific point, that room you want to bring them into, this is what's called your signature story. So this is what you are going to be telling. If you were asked to speak at a summit or an event, or you were going live in your Facebook or your Instagram, or writing like a LinkedIn white page, whatever the case may be, this signature story is what you are going to be coming back to with all 3 acts. So what you need these 2 things for your signature story. You need to talk about how long it took. Change does not happen overnight, and everyone knows this. Everyone wants it to happen, but everyone knows that change does not happen overnight. So talk about how long it took. You want them to see that your pivot, that your program compresses time and gets them results faster. So if they do not purchase your program, if they aren't on board with your signature story, then they are going to have to go through the decade that it took you to get the results that you now have. But, oh wait, your program can get them there in 3 months, 6 months, instead of 10 years. So you want to sell on how long it took. And 2, You want to share your costly and your painful mistakes. Again, success does not come overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. Everyone knows this, but they need to be reminded. They need to know you spent $10,000 in things that did not move the needle in your business. They needed to know that it was painful living paycheck to paycheck. They need to know that it was painful to feel those terrible feelings and those limiting beliefs, right? You want to spill all of that because you want that emotional connection between you and your ideal client. So you want to make them feel like investing in you, that by investing in you, they are avoiding these costly and these painful mistakes. Right? Are we with me? Okay, so to summarize on the things that you need for your signature story. 1, describe in your customer's language. So make sure you are talking the way that your ideal client talks. Right? Use the language, use the verbiage, use the stories, use the platforms. That's another big key point. Use the platforms that your ideal client is on and talk like them. 2, tell your story concisely. So go through that 3-act play. Make sure the emotional hooks are there. Make sure that who you are talking to wants the results that you can get them, right? And then 3, your signature story will turn into your signature program. So find that story, find that moment, find that room you want to take them into and make that your story, which will then turn into your signature program because you take them through the pivot to get the results. All right? How fun was that? If you can't tell, like, I'm still riding a high from this weekend. I could give you guys like 75 trainings from my 100 pages of notes. But today was all about story selling. I hope you guys found it super valuable. Work on your stories. I want to hear it. If you're watching this now, tell me that you're going to be working on it, and I want to see it in the group. If you want to run any questions by me or the group, share your stories in the threads, and we'll try and work them out to get you to that perfect signature story so that you can then have a signature program. Like, let's go. Super excited. And again, I'm working on this too. This was something that I knew in my head, but I hadn't felt it yet. And when I watched and listened to Pat, he's this little introvert he's very soft-spoken, but daggum, can this man tell a story? Like, holy cow. And as he's telling the story, he's adding in everything he's doing along the way, but it doesn't seem like it. And if you can get to that point where storytelling is a gift for you, that you're able to describe these moments, these rooms that you want to take people in, everyone is going to fall in love with you, and not just fall in love with you, but fall in love with the way that you make them feel, right? So yes, I am working on this myself, but I wanted to share my notes and insights with you on this. I'll be bringing some more of these trainings to you on Tuesdays, but you got this. It all starts with you. Now, go be a founder. Have a great rest of your week, guys.